you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion. For the sake of the world, this delusion. It's gotta go. Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to 2014, New Year, same show. Live from Austin, Texas, it's the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillahunty, joined today by Martin Wagner.
Howdy.
How are you, sir?
I am well. How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing all right.
Happy New Year.
Getting good grades.
Excellent.
Futures so bright, blah, blah, blah. So this is a live public access television program out of Austin, Texas. And we take live calls, and we talk to people, and we ask questions, and we get asked questions, and we just have fun with it.
We do.
But before we actually get started on callers, yesterday afternoon, I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a guest on, I think it's KKMS in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is a Christian radio station. A fan of the show, one of our viewers had recommended that they have me on. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit and address a couple things. They said they'd be interested in having me back, which I'll do. So I was on for about 45 minutes. The first 15 was very, very much, please explain to us your background and how you got here. Because everyone seemed to think I was an oddity. Oh, you were a sincere believer and active in the church, and you went to, not some crazy cult, but a Southern Baptist church, and now you're a Christ denier. Which was so much fun to be called a God in Christ denier.
That is fantastic. Yeah, that's so much.
It was, and the one thing that I wanted to say,
because that never happens, right? I mean, right.
And there's several things I wanted to say that I didn't get to. One of them is that I'm not an oddity. Not only are the nuns the fastest growing religious identification right now in the U.S., but most atheists that you run across used to belong to one church or another, probably used to belong to a church very similar to yours. Not everybody who left a religion to become an atheist or identify as an atheist came out of some backward-ass cult. Although I guess maybe you might think all of them are backward-ass cults.
Yeah.
But I'm far from alone. And there were questions about, don't you know, haven't you read John 3:16? Well, of course I have, and so has probably every atheist that you're going to run across. I don't, considering they advertise it in the middle of football games, I really doubt that people
they thought you were that basic, right? So John 3:16.
Yeah.
That one. Okay.
And I didn't trample off a bunch of Bible knowledge in here because the questions were kind of surface level. But in addition to not being an oddity, I wanted to point out to them, and I didn't, that it's not just people who used to go to church. It's pastors as well. We are loaded down with former pastors, with Dan Barker and Richard Haynes and my friend Jerry DeWitt and Teresa McBain and others, and the 400 plus that are involved in the Clergy Project.
The Clergy Project. I was about to say that whole program.
Yeah,
right?
and if it was clearly befuddling to them, and there were questions about. Well, immediately after my background, we went directly to, "Aren't you afraid of hell?" And then we went back to, "Aren't you afraid of hell?" with another caller. That was part of the John 3:16 thing. And then at the end of the show, the host took the last couple minutes and basically told me that he's been praying with his wife, and that day, he was praying for me, and that he knows the Holy Spirit needs to move, and but he wanted me to know why he believes. And his big reason for believing, despite clearly the threat of hell and the Pascal's wager, very top level Pascal stuff.
Yeah, the real tells come in the question they ask you
and how they asked them. But
right.
His reason is because of the prophecies that are in Daniel and how unlikely it is that they could have all come true through chance. And I wanted to address that real quick before we went to callers. Number one, we could do a multi-part show on the professed prophecies in the book of Daniel and whether or not they came true and what that means. But what I would have responded to, and I couldn't, he did this at the end, and there were people on Twitter who complained, saying, "Oh, he hit you at the end with some stuff and didn't let you respond. It's his show. He gets to do that.
Yeah.
And I get to do it here. It wasn't a big debate thing. But let's assume for a second that there are prophecies in Daniel and that they actually have come to pass and that it was all entirely accurate. That's not the case, but let's assume that. How on earth did they determine that the best explanation for these things came true is God did it? There's no way to make that determination because you have no basis for determining how probable it is that a God even exists. And as long as we're stuck in that position where you have no way to calculate how likely this explanation is, then every other explanation automatically becomes more probable until we demonstrate otherwise. I mean, a TARDIS is a more probable explanation for supposed fulfilled prophecies than this God super being, which is far more, outside the realms of science than a TARDIS might be. We don't know. And we don't know how likely a TARDIS is, but at least we're not investing in the supernatural in offering that explanation. But the thing is that that's not the case, that these are actual fulfilled prophecies, or that that's the best explanation for it. Because the thing about a prophecy is that it needs to be very specific, answerable by a single specific occurrence that matches exactly. It can't be open to interpretation. It can't be trivial, like when the waiter brings me a medium rare steak and I ordered a medium rare steak, he's not fulfilling prophecy. Although as rare as I actually get the steak I wanted, it might as well, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Or medium rare.
But see, my response though, because even before you get around to pointing out all of those factors, one thing that I've noticed when I talk to apologists who make a point of bringing up things like, oh, the odds of this are X, and this is so unlikely, blah, 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 and they try to talk about likelihoods and probabilities and things. As you pointed out earlier, I always say, well, have you really actually laid out and considered every conceivable option as an explanation for this particular event? And if you, after doing that, reach the conclusion, no, this can only have come from some sort of divine or magical or extra universal or whatever you want to put its source, how then did you rule every single thing out?
Yeah.
Can you show your work? They just throw these things out like, oh, well, it's so unlikely, and the odds of this and the odds of that, and they don't really understand probability as a concept. You have the same sort of thing with creationists, right? When they talk about, oh, well, the odds of a planet and life evolving and blah, 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 blah. And I said, look, the best thing that you're doing, the best argument you're making when you point out how unlikely life is to have just sort of come about by natural processes and abiogenesis and then an evolutionary process, yada, yada, yada. All you've said is that on this one particular dust speck in this enormous, vast universe, an extremely unlikely thing happened. That's really all you're saying, and unlikely things aren't impossible things, and it would seem, I mean...
it actually gets worse, because even if we were to say that all the prophecies in Daniel were actual prophecies that were fulfilled and they were 100% accurate, we have no reason, we have no understanding of why.
Yeah.
But even if they could propose an understanding of why and demonstrate that it was the most likely answer, that doesn't mean that anything else in that collection of books by disparate authors over hundreds or thousands of years is true. So you don't get to look at Daniel and say, this could only be fulfilled by God. Even if you were correct, that doesn't mean that John 3:16 is true.
Yeah.
So this premise that they're beginning with, that the Bible is true and accurate, is actually how they get around to finding all these fulfilled prophecies, because they're not following the evidence wherever it leads. They are leading the evidence towards their pre-drawn conclusion, which is the Bible is true and accurate.
Yeah.
The other thing that came up was whether or not I was a real Christian, and curiously, and almost in passing, the host of the show mentioned a study that showed how many false Christians there were. And I have no idea. I mean, this to me is like on par with Alcoholics Anonymous recidivism rates.
Right.
Where if you ever go back to drinking, then you didn't actually do the program right.
Yes.
So they only count the ones that stayed in the program and didn't go back to drinking.
So they can claim higher success.
And based on what he was saying, that seems to be the case. He's like, how many of these people stayed in church? Oh, so that you've come up with some measure of who is and who isn't a true Christian. I'd really love it if you guys would sort this out so that we can identify who is and who isn't a true Christian. The problem is that pesky Bible that says that only God knows who's a true Christian. So I don't know how the hell they did a study in the first place, but he's promised to send me a a link, and then we can review
and
it.
see how the numbers have been fudged, and it's all immaterial anyway. I mean, it's just the basic question of whether or not a God exists. It's its own question.
So it was enjoyable. It was a very surface level discussion. There was pretty much no depth, and it was. Oh, you don't believe? I don't understand how you can't believe.
Yeah.
How can you look around and not see the evidence for divine?
And I can see why your Twitter followers kind of, were a little bit huffy about that, sort of like throwing in Daniel at the end there, because that right there, talking about the prophecies in Daniel, that's a 2-hour discussion.
At least.
On its own. So, but you toss it in at the tail end of an interview, and it's sort of like, meh.
But I didn't consider it unfair, because he was only expressing why he believed. If he wants to have another discussion about why he shouldn't believe that, or why that's not a good reason, that's a good thing.
Anyway.
Well,
interesting to sort of, see that world from,
Hey, and I love doing it. It was, hopefully I did satisfactory given everything that was going on.
It's happening at all simply because atheism is now just in the public mind. And we have a profile now that they cannot just ignore. 10 years ago, or at the turn of the century, when I was first starting to do the show with Jeff D and all the guys, there's this whole idea of, sure, Christian radio shows and things like that would talk derisively about atheists all the time, but in terms of actually inviting one on the air as a guest to give his views and attempt to conduct something in the way of an honest interview, that just wouldn't have been heard of.
Yeah, he's definitely in a different, I know I don't want to talk badly about them. This is a disagreement about whether or not something is rational and reasonable.
Right.
He's definitely in a different category than someone like, say, John Hagee, who would rather that we just all pack up and get on a plane and leave his God's country. And I'm sorry, Hagee, that's not going to happen, because we have a constitution and reason and science on our side, so you can keep blathering from the pulpit all you want, and we'll just stay right here and keep winning.
But it says right there in the Bible, America is God's favorite country, doesn't it? Yes.
It's amazing.
And douchebagians number one something.
I think it's 135.
That's it. Yeah. Okay.
Douchebagians, by the way, is an apocryphal book that not everybody has. So if you go looking for it in your Bible, you might not be a true Christian.
Keep that in mind.
Anyway, you ready to
Let's do it. Let's hit it.
Ironically, we'll begin with Faith in Leesburg, Florida. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine.
Pretty good.
Thanks
What do you
for
got
calling.
for us?
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm a theist, and I wondered if you believe that Jesus actually existed.
So I don't know, is my answer. I don't have a big problem with the idea that there may be some real person at the core of this. There's been a lot of scholarly debate on the subject in recent years. I have a friend, Richard Carrier, who's going to be releasing a book that uses Bayesian analysis of history to try and give us a better answer, try and calculate the probability that he actually existed. I'm far less concerned with that, because even if he did exist and this was real, we still then have to say, okay, how accurate is the record of his supposed words and deeds? And then we have the question of, well, was he actually a god? Are these things that he said, even if we have them accurately, are they then true? So it's layers upon layers. And the only reason, for example, if you look back at like Socrates and Plato, does it matter if they existed? Because their words stand and fall on their own merit. And that should be true for anybody and anything. And the only reason that this is different is because if he didn't exist, then the claims that, of course, he was God fall away right off the bat. So that's the only reason why it's really important whether or not he actually existed.
Yeah. Well, now also, he was crucified and rose from the dead, and hundreds of people saw him after he raised from the dead.
How do you prove that?
Yes, that's a problem, because the source, again, we get back to sourcing your historical materials, right?
Right.
What you have a particular passage in a holy book that makes claims about what eyewitnesses saw, what eyewitnesses didn't see, but what sort of verification can we apply to any of that? It doesn't seem like there's much.
The analogy that I've used before on this is there are living, breathing people right now that you can go talk to who will tell you about their alien abduction story. I mean, this is happening now and has been happening for years. People are coming forward saying, this happened to me. And you can actually talk to them and interview them. I don't believe that they've actually been abducted by aliens. Most people don't. And yet, if you take that story and move it back 2,000 years to where now we can no longer talk to these people at all, and all we have is anonymous hearsay accounts, how does that make the story more believable? To me, it makes it even less believable. So if I don't have a good reason to think that people that I've actually could meet and talk to have been abducted by aliens, then I certainly don't have a good reason to believe an anonymous account of a bunch of unnamed people that we can't talk to claiming to have seen somebody rise from the dead.
And it is an extraordinary claim, too. I mean, we're talking about, the basic question is, what is more reasonable to believe given the evidence we have? That at this point in history, one human body did something that no human body had ever done before or has ever done since, or that, you know, that these are stories about a possibly a possible actual historical figure, but that were then later on mythologized, fictionalized, mythicized, which is a thing that happened back then. We do know from reading other historical texts. I've read a lot of histories, for example, just ancient Roman histories written at the time, translations from the ancient texts, where the writers then were talking about popular beliefs concerning Roman emperors or Roman generals. The soldiers would actually believe in omens. You know, if an eagle flew over the camp or something like that, then they sincerely believed that this was the gods favoring their general and that the battle that day would go their way. So we know that people thought this way back then. They had these magical, mystical beliefs. It's not surprising that such stories, if Jesus was a figure who did some of the things that he has claimed to have done, that the people who believed in him and supported him would have just come up with such beliefs and tales themselves. That's not unusual. And it seems a much more plausible explanation than, no, a dead body actually came back to life.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're saying. I don't agree. I believe that he really was crucified and did raise from the dead. But I wanted to point out today was Epiphany, and the first reading was from Isaiah, which talked about the rulers of the earth will bring gold and frankincense. That was written 750 years before Christ's birth.
Are you talking about the
Messiah? Yeah.
Well,
all I'm saying is,
actually,
it was written 750 years before Christ's birth.
Just a second, Faith, hang on, just a second.
Actually, the Jews don't agree with you that that was written about the Messiah or that it was fulfilled. So, you say you disagree and that you believe he actually, was crucified and died and rose again. And I'm wondering why you actually believe it, because the why is the important part. It's probably more important than what you actually believe.
Okay. Do you believe that the Holocaust really existed?
Yes.
Okay. There are people that we come from Chicago, and there's a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago who wrote about how the Holocaust never happened.
Yes,
that was just all made up.
There are Holocaust deniers. Unfortunately for them, we have a really good record, including survivors that rebut that.
Yes, and you have all the survivors
that you can talk to.
Wait! You have the followers of Christ and their successors, and
no, you
on
don't.
for. You have the.
You do realize the Gospels are anonymous, right? And that we can't go talk to any of those people, right?
Who cares who wrote them?
I would agree.
The point is that those exist, and the apostles of Christ had successors that continued on and wrote, and the history, it's been going on for 2,000 years now.
Well, that's not evidence, that's anecdote. Yeah. That is, you're basically saying that because this claim has been tenacious and lots of people have believed it, that it's believable, and that's simply false.
Well, again, and it comes back to the quality of evidence. Remember what I mentioned before. Holocaust deniers are going against a vast body of very easy to confirm evidence.
And by the way, the Holocaust, natural event, no appeals to the supernatural. It's very, very different from the idea that there was this person who lived and performed miracles that violate the natural order and then rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Then not all claims are the same. Some claims are extraordinary and require extraordinary evidence. And by the way, if it turns out that there wasn't a Holocaust, that we have been duped by something, so what? my eternal life is not in any way dependent about whether or not I'm correct about the Holocaust.
See, it comes down to this. Let me try to put some of this in context, so maybe that you'll sort of understand where we're coming from on it. You know, you get farther back in time, and so it becomes a bit more difficult to come up with things to confirm the historicity of something, right? The accuracy of an account of something. You know, the farther you go back in time, it is more and more difficult to find reliable accounts. That's just the nature of that, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. You know, I'm researching a documentary about something that happened 130 years ago in Austin. Very difficult to find sources. You know, the farther you go back, if I were to go back 300 or 400 years to some other, I would have a whole lot of work to do to find reliable sources. You're going back 2,000 years, again, much more difficult to find these reliable sources. Something that happened less than a century ago when you have photographs and film footage and, again, actual survivors who are interviewed. Okay, that's a very strong body of good evidence for something that is not an extraordinary claim. I mean, for example, the Holocaust was extraordinary in terms of the degree of human cruelty that was going on, but it's not extraordinary in that no one is claiming any kind of supernatural or divine agency is involved in any of this. Whereas if you're talking about, you know, again, a human being rising from the dead and becoming a sort of God-man, or having always been a God-man and fulfilling some kind of divine plan, you now have several millennia where we're actually separated from the supposed event, plus a real dearth of any historical document that isn't like directly from the holy book of the religion that is all about worshiping this holy man. You have an inability to find, you know, extra biblical documents that confirm any of these events. You know, you have contradictions within the holy book themselves. Was there an earthquake? Yes, no. How many people turned up at the tomb? You know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 20. The Gospels themselves are very inconsistent on how they talk about the resurrection, how they describe the events. So again, just to get to the facts of things, it's a whole heck of a lot more difficult. So, you know, you can't just look at something that happened 50, 60, 70 years ago and say, this is on an equal footing of something that supposedly happened not only 2,000 years ago, but also had magic supposedly involved. And see, there's a degree of things, and it's a false equivalence to say.
And I'm going to let you respond in just a second. I just wanted one little thing that kind of dovetails onto what Martin was talking about. If we have a set standard of evidence for that we use to determine whether or not a historical claim probably occurred or actually occurred, if we lower our standards of evidence to the point that the claims about Jesus are accepted, then we have no reason, no good reason, to reject the other claims of other miracle saviors or other religions. We just have to kind of take it all in. I mean, the Muslims would tell you that they have the original copy of their book and that they have a much better annotated history from the beginning of their religion until now than Christianity does. And so if we've lowered our standards of evidence so far that Jesus gets in and gets a pass on all the miracle stuff, then we'd be stuck believing everything, and we'd be believing contradictory things.
You know, the ancient Egyptians with all of their frescoes and their reliefs on their tomb walls, those are original documents, technically, but because they talk about, you know, the Book of the Dead and their pantheon and all that, should we consider them credible just on those grounds? No. I mean, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
And so
when I called last time, I was asking about the beginning of the universe, and they were talking about how it was a whole bunch of matter squeezed together, and then it just exploded, and that's how we've got our universe and our planets.
Well,
and what I'm saying is, matter does not. It remains stable. So
no,
that means that some force had to bring that little ball of matter into existence in the first place.
How did you determine that? I mean, first of all, your explanation. I don't want to pick it apart too much, and I'm not a physicist, and this is not a show about.
Well, I mean, that's what you guys told. The guy that was a month ago, who was the host, said that the universe started with an extremely condensed ball of matter that exploded. We call that the Big Bang, and the universe is still exploding.
So we don't know the nature of all that. We can't look back beyond the Planck time, which is a slight fraction, the smallest fraction of a second that we can address after the event. What we do know is that it happened, or at least something happened, and the evidence for the Big Bang model seems strong. It could be that the Big Bang model is actually in error. But science stops at that point and says, you know what, right now, we can't go any further than this. We have no mechanism to see behind it, and so it's unknown. And yet you are asserting that there must have been something to cause this, and apparently, although I didn't let you actually get that far, you've concluded that the best explanation for this is God. And I don't know how anybody could say that God is the best explanation when it has no explanatory power. We explain things in terms of other things that we understand, and so trying to solve the biggest mystery in the universe by appealing to a bigger mystery, saying God did it is indistinguishable from saying it was magic. And until you can come up with a way to demonstrate the probability of a God existing that is capable of doing this, then your answer, God created the universe, is fundamentally the same as universe-creating pixies created the universe. They are two...
Yeah, but he revealed himself to the Jewish people, and...
Why does... okay,
you know,
you say that.
Throughout thousands of years there.
You say that, but what's your evidence that he revealed himself to anybody ever?
It's in the Old Testament there.
Okay, what reason do you have to think that the Old Testament is true, and why has he stopped revealing himself?
Who said he stopped revealing himself? I see his work all the time.
Well, no, you see things that you attribute to God, but if God were actually still revealing himself, then we wouldn't be having these conversations about the origins of the universe or whether or not Jesus was a historical figure. It would be a settled issue if God was actually revealing himself.
I think that there would be no reason for faith if.
Why
God was revealing, as you just said, God.
If he was hitting himself over the head with his presence, there would be no need for faith.
What good is faith, and why is it important? What's wrong with God just revealing himself? He revealed himself supposedly, according to you, to the Jews.
Yeah, right.
So why can't he reveal himself to everybody else? Why are we required to accept it on worse evidence than those people?
Well,
Christ was God in the flesh.
That didn't answer the question, Faith.
My Uncle Bernie was also God in the flesh.
Yeah.
I mean, why is it okay for him to give clear, supposedly concrete evidence to one group of people thousands of years ago and not the rest of us?
See, there's an inconsistency in your argument, Faith. You first mentioned that, well, God revealed himself to the Jews, a direct revelation. You believe that's happened, and you have given that as your justification for believing that the Old Testament is valid. But when we ask, well, why doesn't God do his business in the same way today? You say, oh, well, God can't do that because then there would be no reason for faith. So why did the rules change suddenly? Why was eliminating the possibility for faith back then not a problem, but it is now for God? I mean, why would God change his agenda?
I really don't know, but that's a very good question. I like that, but it's not.
Just think about it.
Something I hadn't thought about before.
There's another aspect of this, and I'm not trying to paint you in a corner. Do you believe in the devil?
Oh yeah.
And the devil knows that God exists and lived in heaven for a while, was cast down, and all that.
Right.
So the devil has absolute confirmation that there is a God and has a good idea of exactly how powerful he is, and yet the devil was free to reject God. So as long as that's a possibility, then there can be no problem with God revealing himself to everybody, because we would all still be free to reject him, as I would.
That's a good point.
Thanks.
Okay. Well,
yeah, very good point. Yeah.
Well, think about some of this stuff and.
Yeah, and the last question that they typed up, which I'm just going to hit real quick, and we're going to move on to some other callers, was your question about miracles, and it pretty much follows the same route of everything else we've been talking about. We don't have any scientific confirmation of miracles, despite what some people claim. If these things had been confirmed, they'd be front page news. They would be, Nobel Prize winning things. The Templeton Foundation wouldn't have to keep sending money to people to try to prove that prayer works, because they'd be the first ones saying, we've proved it. And yet, curiously, as our ability to investigate the world has increased, the reported supposed confirmation of miracles has decreased. And I find that rather curious, that the more we learn about the universe and how it works, the less God seems to be capable of or willing to do. And I go back to, if a Damascus Road appearance and experience was good enough for Saul, then it should be good enough for all of us. There's no reason the rest of us should have to turn our brains off and rely on hearsay from other people and anonymous people in order to justify believing something.
And were miracles...
I think it's interesting, though, that what you have is the Catholic Church for 2,000 years has maintained has passed on the information from Jesus and actually from before him.
Have they? How accurate is it? Do we have some way of testing? That's the whole point. We know that the church has existed, and we know that they've portrayed these ideas, although they've changed their minds on some things that they evidently invented, like limbo or whatever. But what we don't know is how accurate is the information that they've passed on to relative to what actually happened. And then there's still, as I pointed out at the very beginning, the secondary question of, is it actually true? The fact that a group of people have believed something fervently for a long time and passed it on is irrelevant, because the truth of a claim isn't impacted in any way by the number of people who believe it or how strongly they believe it. It's rooted in actual evidence, and there simply isn't enough to accept. I mean, these are big claims, and given some of the claims that the church and other Christian religious organizations have made that we know are false, the things about the age of the universe and stuff. I think the record is 0 confirmed supernatural events on theirs and hundreds of disconfirmed claims by them. And so my bet at this point is that they're probably wrong about more, and until I have evidence for what they're actually correct about, I don't have any good reason to believe them.
Well, when it comes down to
what you're saying sounds very good. I think that is not correct. There are lots of miracles that hold up, and but that's really a whole different thing. I think the miracles that Christ performed in the recorded in the Bible are amazing things, turning water to wine. And
well, sure, they're amazing, but did they happen? Again, when it comes down to miracle claims, I keep thinking about, the Roman general and the eagle and all of these things that people believed back then. I mean, yes, we hear about turning water into wine. We hear about walking on water. We hear about all
I realize that. What bothers me is I look at my watch, and I could tell you how that happened to come about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you would tell me, no. A watchmaker made it. Oh. Now, you look at the incredible laws that run this universe, and they're very specific. If they were changed to just a touch, we wouldn't be here.
You understand that they are...
Wait, I'm not finished.
Okay.
All right, fine.
And how can you look at these magnificent laws and say that there wasn't a lawgiver behind them? I mean,
because there's no evidence that that's the way the universe works.
You look at a watch. I'd just like to finish this one sentence. You look at a watch and you say a watchmaker made it. How come you can't look at the laws of the universe and say they came about by a lawgiver?
Faith, on the watchmaker analogy, okay, let's follow this through.
Yeah.
You walk in, you find a watch on the beach.
Yeah.
You say, this must have been designed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how is it stand? Well, hold it. Wait, whoa.
Hang on.
You didn't want us to interrupt you. It's my turn now. Okay.
We'll get there. She's got an orb.
Well, I just want to clarify what I'm saying. It's just like if you looked at Stonehenge, you know that was...
Yeah, we got it. Okay.
We understand. We've been doing this for years.
We understand what you mean. Okay. Okay. So, in order to determine that...
I've understood it for years, too. So,
in order to determine that you think it was designed, what are you comparing it to?
See, we recognize design by comparing it to things that are undesigned. And if you believe that God created everything, then you can't possibly walk along a beach, pick up a watch, and say this is designed, because in your world, you're walking on a universe of watches, on a beach of watches, and picking up one watch and saying, oh, this is clearly designed, when you think everything was designed. And the truth is, we don't recognize design by complexity. We recognize design because there is evidence for design and no evidence of something naturally occurring like that. And if we came across evidence that watches were naturally occurring, we'd be in a pickle. But we know that watches are designed because we already know the process by which watches were designed. If you walked onto another planet and were walking around and you found something, how could you tell whether or not it was designed if you have no knowledge of that civilization, or if there was a civilization? And the answer is you would have to contrast it to something. Something designed is contrasted against something that's not designed.
Mm-hmm. You have to have a frame of reference.
So what are you comparing it to?
I really am not following you.
In your model, God designed everything, correct?
He started out the universe with the laws of the universe, yeah.
So even the grain of sand God designed, right?
Well, I mean, you know,
God didn't design grains of sand?
I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, it's a question. Doesn't matter where I'm going.
Yeah.
Did God design grains of sand?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you find a watch on a beach, you have two designed things sitting there. You haven't demonstrated any mechanism for how you determined the difference. The reason this watchmaker analogy has had so much traction among apologists is because people intuitively think that they recognize design. Oh, look, it's Mount Rushmore. Clearly that was designed. Oh, look, it's a watch. Clearly it was designed. What you don't seem to understand is that you know that those things are designed because you have mountains and mountains of evidence for the design. And if instead you point to human beings and say, oh, they're designed, you actually need some evidence that human beings are designed, because all of the available evidence points to the conclusion that humans are naturally occurring. We have a mechanism for reproduction. We have a long history throughout, from the beginning to now, of how humans evolved. There's nothing there about design.
And you have to, in order to say that the universe is designed, you need to have a frame of reference to say that anything is designed. Well, what in your mind would a non-God designed universe look like?
Yeah, we got no universes to compare it to.
Yeah, I mean, if our universe was not designed by God, what do you think it would look like? Describe it. How would it function?
You guys are really something, and I must tell you, it's really not fair. You have 2 against 1 here, you know.
You know, it's about the arguments, not the numbers.
No,
right?
We also have science against fallacy.
Your 2 minds are, and I just want my 1 mind, and you have your 2. You know, you guys are. It's a 2 against 1, which is really not fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I enjoy listening to your shows, and and it's very, you know, very thought provoking.
Well, thanks, Faith. Why don't you go find 2 friends, and I'll let you go 3 against 1 with me someday.
That's fair.
That sounds wonderful.
Great.
Okay, great. Take care. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Faith. Thank you.
Yeah. What would a non-God designed universe look like?
That's the thing. You know, when I talked, it was probably rather snarky of me to say that. Oh, we've been doing this for years. Well, I mean, that's irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, it's just that these are extremely common arguments that
yes.
we hear, and so it's,
and these are not just common arguments. Yeah. These are the basic common arguments, and this. You know, Ray Comfort would use the, oh, a building has a builder, and a painting has a painter, therefore creation has a creator. Whoops, stop. Why did you call it creation? Yeah. That's a cheat. Of course, a creation has a creator, but you haven't demonstrated that the universe is a creation.
Yes.
And the reason that you know that a building has a builder is because there's no evidence for buildings naturally occurring, and tons of evidence for buildings being designed and built, and the same true for painting. If you found just splotches of paint on the ground, or splotches of color, I guess, on the ground, do you get to call it a painting?
No, Jackson Pollock would.
Sorry. Given Jackson Pollock as an example, what do you get to call a painting? Oh, well, it looks like a human. Okay. Well, it's so clear. I mean, the Mona Lisa couldn't just accidentally happen. Well, I agree that it's incredibly unlikely, but the reason we know is because we know how these things work.
Yeah.
We've investigated them.
Simplicity
We've constructed them.
is a greater evidence of design, actually, than complexity.
But
But
simplicity is the hallmark of design, not complexity, which is another thing they get back.
But before we move on, two basic mistakes being made here. Don't make the basic mistake of thinking the laws of the universe are descriptive, not proscriptive.
Right.
And secondly, don't confuse design with order.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental, that's the foundational error that Christian apologists make when they give us the argument that faith made.
Yeah,
Confusing design, which has a mind and an intent behind it, with order, which is entailed by, that's the nature of it, that's ontological, it's just the nature of existence itself, order.
And when Martin talks about the laws of the universe being descriptive, one of the things that I would have asked Faith is, let's say the laws of the universe, or the universal constants, or the way the universe worked, were slightly different, and we couldn't possibly be here. How do you know that there wouldn't be some other thinking being sitting there going, wow, this is just preposterous that this universe could have happened entirely by accident, it's fit for me. Douglas Adams has my favorite take on that with the puddle, which is at wiki.ironchariots.org.
It is, yeah.
So you can look at it there.
Anyway, well, that was a
long call, but a good one.
epic call, but again, good points. You guys want theists to call, we got them.
So we got Sean in Milwaukee. How are you?
All right. Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, my question is that there are books that came out a long time ago. In fact, Homer's books came out probably before the Bible, and they call it mythology. But yet there are scientists who are looking for the city of Troy. In Plato's Republic, he describes Atlantis. There are scientists looking for Atlantis. So I'm an in-betweener. I ask too many questions to people. The Christian people will get really mad at me. But I'm trying to figure out why scientists would try to find reasons, even on CNN, that they're trying to find reasons of proof of God, and they're scientists.
Well, are they looking for proof of God, or are they just looking for evidence of just some sort of historical location or thing? I mean, we know that certain historical locations existed. You know, Jericho, the biblical city, is an actual ruin. I mean, that exists. But does that mean that any sort of mythological tales that were set in those locations actually happened? No, not necessarily. Spider-Man takes place in New York.
I'd say that when 70+% of the population believes something, and that there's probably a good reason for scientists to go see if they can actually confirm it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, because I mean, they're spending a lot of money trying to find Atlantis and trying to find the city. Yeah, they're trying to find the city of Troy, and there hasn't been no proof about that. And how can there be proof? That about. I mean, you say the city of Jericho, but how can there be proof about anything that actually happened in Jericho that was mythology or wasn't mythology?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what your actual question is.
I think I know what he's getting at. Okay. You will find bogus researchers, people who have belief systems that they are looking for validation. And they do what's called pseudoscience.
They find Noah's Ark every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, there are on the one hand there are actual archaeologists, there are scientists who just go out and they do science right. For example, they just start out, they gather evidence, then they come up with their conclusion based on what they find. Then on the other hand, you have the pseudoscientists, and these are usually people with agendas, belief systems they need to protect or validate, and they're like, all right, we need to find evidence of X because it's what we believe, and so they go looking for, Atlantis, or the Loch Ness Monster, or Bigfoot, or haunted houses, or crop circles, or whatever. They look for these things to validate something they've already decided to believe. So yeah, in that regard, there are a lot of people out there who pretend to be scientists and who talk like they're scientists and they have some kind of scientific cred. But they're bogus, and there's people like that all over the place. So,
there are people who are going to be looking for the gold of the lost Dutchman and everything else, because this one big discovery could potentially make their career, or because They have become convinced that they're on the right track, whether they are or not. They get some financial backing and they go out and do it. I don't really see what the problem is. Let them keep looking. The time to believe something is when they've actually found some evidence to support their claim. Until then, they're out looking, and they may be nuts or they may not be.
Okay, all right. And actually, with the first caller, Lazarus was the first one who died, not Jesus.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What's the name?
In the first caller that you had in the Bible, it says Lazarus was raised by Jesus.
Yes.
And he was dead. So actually, Lazarus was the first person.
Did she say Jesus was the? I didn't hear her say Jesus was the first, or I would have corrected her. But
well, there might have been a basically. Well, and also, you know, after Jesus' resurrection, there's at least one gospel account of massive numbers of
that was before the resurrection.
Yeah, or before actually.
It was during the death when the Jewish zombies came out of their graves
I read
and stormed.
I don't believe it, but I read that part because I heard you say there's no historical evidence based on that.
You know, it's fascinating. I never heard about the you know, the Jewish zombie you know, invasion of Jerusalem until all these things you don't hear about when you're a church-going, Sunday school-going Christian. They only come up when you're an atheist. It's sort of like, oh, this was in there all this time?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The thing is that when I ask questions, and I get really angry reactions when the person cannot answer me. And these are Christians, and then they're mad at me, and they like, you know, on Facebook they'll block me or something like that. And all I'm doing is asking a question.
Sometimes questions can make people very uncomfortable if they don't feel that their answer is particularly good or convincing. And
I talked to probably the most liberal pastor there is, and she basically couldn't answer my questions. And then when I corrected her, she wasn't too happy because she says forgiveness comes when they want to forgive you, and then they got to go to their God. I said, well, their God, you said there's only one God. And then she kind of got them found it and just said, I got to go. So
yeah,
it happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for calling, Sean. We appreciate it.
Really do.
Thanks, guys. I love your show. Bye.
Thanks, man. We really appreciate it.
I love our show, too.
I do. I give our show hugs every day.
We've got Robert in Monroe. How are you?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Martin. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
I'm a first-time caller, and I just called in because I've been a little bit sick and under the weather the past couple of days, so I was on the web more than usual. And I happened to come across the fact that it looks like Bill Nye is going to debate Ken Ham at the Creation Museum, and I just wondered if you guys had heard about that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to avoid.
I think it's a bad idea.
You think it's a bad idea for him to do that?
Yeah.
My really only question was, do you think that, given that it looks like the ticket price is going to be $25, do you think that any atheist should actually buy tickets and go as kind of a show of support for Bill?
I wouldn't buy a ticket until I knew for sure where the money was coming, although it would be nice if the... So there are some atheists who have said, hey, atheists should get there and buy tickets so that the audience isn't one-sided. I don't know what experience Bill has doing formal debates. He's a great representative of science. You put him on TV and he can do a little back and forth and clean people's clock, and I love the guy. I don't know what his experience is in formal debates. I wasn't able to find any formal debates that he's in, so I don't know if he's really ready, because it's not about who knows the most about science or who has the facts on their side. There's a bit of theater, there's personality, and Bill's got a great personality, but when I'm debating a theist, I don't want a single other atheist in the room. I want that place entirely populated by theists, because my goal is not to win a debate or convert an audience. It's to get information out to as many people as possible and to force them into the difficult position of having to question some of the things that they believe. And if it doesn't happen that night, maybe 4 or 5 years down the line when they actually meet another atheist and they have to have a conversation, they think back to that debate they saw, and yeah, this guy said that and it didn't quite make sense at the time. That's what I'm looking for. And to me, you got the Creation Museum, which was just about to go bankrupt, possibly.
Yeah, is that true, Matt? I had kind of heard something that they are in like financial difficulty, so I'm almost wondering if this is almost like a fundraising
well,
event.
Well, probably, because I mean, admissions are falling because, I mean, the Creation Museum, it's you know, one-trick pony, right? Nothing changes. You know, real museums like the Smithsonian stay vital because there are always new discoveries and new exhibits and things and new knowledge to impart to the public. Creation Museum has nothing like that, right?
I don't have access to their financials, so I can't say what kind of position they're in.
Well, they've been reduced to selling junk bonds in order to fund this Ark Park thing, which is Ken Ham's latest boondoggle. But the problem is that we have with this generally is that these kind of debates tend to give guys like Ken Ham a scientific credibility that they don't deserve. Creationists love debating science because they can't actually get into peer-reviewed journals because they don't have any actual science behind their position. But but most of them, especially if they're ministers and pastors, are awesome public speakers. And so this sort of becomes a substitute for getting, at least in their own minds, some degree of scientific cred. They can get in front of, behind a podium in front of a friendly audience and make moronic points that the believers cheer on, and they just think, you know, the validation to them is what proves that they are right, you know, in absence of any actual findings or research that they can present. And the problem, and so generally we have a problem when scientists, who I think should know better, you know, are willing to kind of give these guys this theatrical platform.
It's my biggest concern is that Bill Nye will find himself facing a Gish Gallop sort of condition where the creationist has rattled off 10 things very quickly, just bald-faced assertions about the universe, all of which are wrong, and he can do it all in just a minute or two, and each one of the things that are wrong would take, you know, a good 10 or 15, 20 minutes to explain exactly why it's wrong and why we know it's wrong. And taken as a whole, it would require, I don't know, an actual education of many years that would result in a degree.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one problem that there's so many sound bites. It kind of goes with a corollary, I think, that your first caller kind of represented when you talked about extraordinary evidence extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. It also, to me, seems that weak evidence does not strengthen other weak evidence. No matter how much of it you got, it's all weak.
So there's one aspect of this. By the way, if anybody watching the show gets a chance to talk to Bill Nye before he actually does this debate, there's one thing that I would say that I've learned from doing these debates, and you can see it in action in my latest debate with Cliff Conneckley, the second one. And that is, I am concerned about the perception. That's what debate's about. It's about what kind of perception do they walk away with. And so I will now be forthright in calling out the difference in the style of what was presented. And so in my debate with Cliff got up and gave a whole bunch of little mini sermons and just kept talking about meaning and purpose and offered nothing of substance. And did not respond to the things that I'd said in a way that was actually evidence-based or forthright. And I pointed out in the closing that if you look back over this debate we just had, you'll see that I tried to address as many of Cliff's points as I could, and that the responses that I gave were not flat assertions or fallacious appeals, but that I was honestly trying to address these things and give explanations and was willing to say I don't know when I don't know. And if Bill Nye is going to go up against Ken Ham and face a potential Gish Gallop, he needs to be ready in his closing to recap what happened in that debate and point out that this was assertion, 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 countered by science information, addressed honestly, without appeals to authority, without appeals to fallacies, and then say which one of those two styles best represents an honest representation of a truthful position. That is the way to get people thinking. What did I just witness? Oh, this guy said this and this guy said this. Oh, I have no way of reconciling this. How did they address those things? Did they care? Did they think? Did they think about what the other person said and actually respond to it? Or did they just wait for their turn to keep preaching?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Matt and Martin. And again, Happy New Year. And Matt, if you happen ever to get up to the Northeast here sometime, I'd be happy to come and see you live sometime.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. Bye now.
Take care.
Take care.
So we got just a few minutes left in the show. After the show's together, after the show's done, the people involved in the show get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's. 301 West Riverside Drive. Can't tell you what to do, but there'll be some people there.
There will be some, yes.
Oh.
Let's
Hey, we've got Linda in Boulder. Thanks for calling.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
just fine.
Good.
We only have a few minutes.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment. The other day I thought of that I myself am a theist, and I just find it interesting that as an atheist, you have said that, you know, the definition is one who disbelieves or denies the existence of God.
Yeah.
But as an agnostic, they're unsure of the belief or not of the belief. And so I'm just curious as to, I think everyone should be considered agnostic until y'all come out with concrete evidence that there is not a God.
Yeah, but we're not making, first off, we're not making the positive assertion that there isn't a God. I mean, some atheists do that. But just to give you the short version, they're two separate claims. Gnosticism or agnosticism has to do with knowledge claims. They're epistemological claims, what you claim to know. But theism, atheism have to do with what you claim to believe. So I can say, I don't believe a God exists, but I admit that I do not know that for an absolute fact. You know, the two are not, I mean, they can be complementary to one another. They're not, you know, one does not rule out the other.
Agnosticism is not a middle ground between theism and atheism. There is no middle ground. You either believe or you don't believe.
Yeah.
Agnosticism is something separate. So you could be an agnostic atheist or an agnostic theist.
Yeah. I know many practicing Christians who, you know, you back them against a corner, they honestly admit that they're agnostic theists. You know, so, well, I can't prove it. I don't know for certain, but I believe in my heart there's a God. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but as long as you separate knowledge from belief and understand that they're two different, they're addressing two different ways of thought, then...
Yeah, atheism is not the belief there is no God. That's not what atheism is.
Yeah.
Atheism...
Anti-theism would be that.
And among other potential labels, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do agree with that, but probably the only thing that I believe that even comes close to denying the existence was that work that was published in about, I think, 1993.
Okay.
Are y'all familiar with it?
Well,
a work that was published in 1993? Of course I'm familiar with that.
A name would help, yeah, a title.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, it's called The Life and Times of Harry Platypus.
Nope, don't know that one.
Yeah, don't know it, but pretty sure that was supposed to be funny to somebody.
Yeah.
I think that was an entirely fake caller that... Can you, if you're going to do that...
You know what, it doesn't matter because we made sensible, stated facts. So,
and I've said that before. As long as we get to make, you know, valid points to help somebody out. Harry Platypus.
I think we should leave her sex life out of this.
Oh man. All right, I better take a call.
I went there.
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah, it's
just.
We have 1 minute.
Okay. Well.
We can't take a call with 1 minute left.
Yeah, can't really do it.
So.
Do you have like public speaking plans, engagements, things coming up in
No,
spring?
actually, but it's good that I note that over the next couple months, apart from being on the show, I'll be kind of out of it and won't be responding to as much email.
Okay.
I've got some big work projects, plus we just moved to a new house. And there's the list of the people who actually made the show happen right there.
Our amazing crew.
Yay! And I'll be back next week with, I think, maybe Jen?
And thanks to our studio audience for tuning up. We had a good
Maybe
crowd
Jen.
today. Thank
Yay,
you,
big
everybody.
crowd.
Yeah. Right.
Stay safe and have a happy new year.
Indeed, do that. Well. Bye. Bye, peoples. Oh, post show.
Blake.
What are you doing? Blake, hi.
Hey, what's up?
You're on the post show.
Yeah, the show's over, and the answer to your question is I have no clue.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Blake, it says here your question was if we had a video camera that recorded since the beginning of time, what would it look like? I guess it'd be a really big camera with a lot of media.
It would have to be a hell of a big SD card, I'll tell you that.
Oh, what would the video look like? Yeah, I don't know that either.
Yeah. But anyway,
all right.
Probably, sorry.
But thanks for waiting. I'm sorry we couldn't get to you.
Yeah.
Actually, another question I had was, I can't believe you guys haven't heard of the Harry Platypus book. That's my childhood book. That's my favorite one.
Oh,
Yeah.
well. We were deprived.
I don't read enough, evidently, but I'll see if I can get right on that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Shane has called from Germany. He's been waiting patiently. Thank you. Oh, well, we lost him.
We lost Shane.
We're sorry, Shane, but...
Hello?
I think...
Hello.
Hi, you're on the post show.
Hi, sorry, this is Shane calling from Germany.
Oh, hi, okay, there we go. All right.
Yeah, I got dropped and then I tried to call back and I couldn't get through until just now, so
sorry.
Thanks for waiting and taking the call post-show. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So Happy New Year's, guys.
Thanks so much.
We don't have long, so let's get to it, can we?
Yeah, I've got your...
Yes, absolutely, sorry. Two real quick questions. First is, I've got a friend who's, I would define as agnostic, theist, who is starting to have doubts and she's on the fence. And knowing that I'm an atheist, she's come to me kind of looking for answers. That as much as I try and logically provide, I can't really give her the answer she's looking for because she is a friend. And I don't want to, like, breach that part where now we're just going into debate as opposed to just trying to give her logical answers. And I was wondering if you had any advice for a situation like that. I will say that one of the things that we've done in fairness of any kind of argument or any kind of question she has is we've thrown out the Bible as a reference usually for her benefit, but because she is a non-denominational Christian. So we've agreed that, okay, fine, we'll throw the Bible out so neither of us can use that. But then it comes to a point where I don't know how to handle her questions and answer her truthfully and kind of give her the responses she's looking for. So do you have any advice or maybe some websites as opposed to Iron Chariots, which I've tried to get her to go to, but something to maybe be able to fulfill her questions better than I can?
My favorite books to recommend to people that you want to keep as your friends who are in these questioning positions. Number one would probably be Guy P. Harrison's 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God, because he goes through and addresses them all fairly well, and it's light and it's short. So that's a lot easier than and better right off the bat than God Delusion or anything like that. Is
the concern is that you might lose a friendship here, or that, you know?
No, my concern is I guess I don't want to push her too far too fast.
We get that. I think the main thing let her do most of the talking mainly. I see, because without any specific ideas about like exactly what the stumbling blocks are, but generally speaking, you know, just let her just sort of voice what her confusions are, and then take them step by step, just slowly, just baby steps. I don't know.
The best thing I've found over all the years is still the Socratic method. Ask questions and let them lead themselves to the answers.
Right. Let them come to their own conclusions, and that's one of the things I told her is I'll address any thought you have, and you can come to your own conclusion from that.
Well, you remember Faith from the beginning of the show. I mean, you know, she's still a believer, very much so. But you know, at a certain point, she was like, "You guys made some good points there. You made some good points." And so you do get through, but you just take it slowly and you know, keep it friendly, and it'll work out.
Okay, I will look into that book.
Sorry we couldn't be more detailed, but again, you know, without knowing your...
You can also do...
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't give you enough details, and I know it's post, so I can't really chat with you forever.
You can also...
One question I had for you guys, though.
You can also work out a trade. I mean, she's a non-denominational Christian, but does she go to a church somewhere?
She does not. Her family does.
Okay. Well, if she did, I was going to say you could work out a trade. You go to church with her, then she comes to, you know, some debate or some atheist gathering with you type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a good idea. One last thing real quick, guys. As you know, I'm calling from Germany. I've been here my entire life, born and raised.
Well, great.
You have no accent that I can detect.
I don't, because my parents are American, prior service.
Yeah.
All right. But I've been here forever. I actually enlisted in the U.S. military over here and then got stationed here. So my experience in America is very tiny. My question for you, and obviously this is going to depend on where I'm located, but I'm getting ready to be stationed in America. What can I expect? And that's a broad question, and I apologize for being so broad.
Well, yeah, and in terms of what exactly? I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't sweat it very much. You know, be yourself. Find an atheist group. You know, so that you don't find yourself necessarily alone. But I wouldn't. It's really not as big a deal in most places for most people as some have made it out to be. I mean, I do this all the time on the show, but in my daily life, it hardly matters whether I'm an atheist or not with almost everybody that I interact with. And while it's going to be slightly different in the military, and definitely there are people you could talk to, like Jen or Oak de Berg, who gave us a really good talk about that, there may be some problems within the military structure, but there's the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers that you can talk to for more information on that front.
Yeah, but it's not like, theists just, roam the streets in little gangs, looking for
like
unbelievers to,
really been.
yeah, just, grab by the collar and drag down an alley.
Las Vegas and Oklahoma, so.
Yeah, all right.
Well, Oklahoma is going to be on the far end of what you can expect. Those are like the two opposites almost.
Yeah, gotta go.
If you said like Las Vegas and West Virginia, I think you'd have had the extremes covered.
Okay. Well, hey, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks for talking to me after post. Enjoy your dinner, and Happy New Year.
Thanks, you too.
Take care.
Well,